Hey, hello, welcome to Cloud and Sec, your cloud and cybersecurity channel on YouTube. In this video, I want to talk about the cybersecurity news that are relevant for you as a cybersecurity leader for the long term, and they're all the news that happened in September. It's been a very packed month. So much has happened in terms of cybersecurity incidents, but also in terms of new reports coming up, and most importantly, a lot of new industry analysts reports coming up as well. And thus, this episode is going to be a little longer than usual, but let's dive in. Okay, first piece of news that I want to highlight are news related to people. So news that impacted people information. Starting off with a hack that affected the MGM casino. It started off in mid-September, around the 11th of September. The impact in terms of number was reported by BBC in this article here, reported to be more than 10 million guests' personal data information to have been exposed. But what happened, right? So it's said that MGM was made a victim of the group known as a scattered spider, right? This is what it's believed to be, right? So this group is very good in social engineering, particularly in phishing, voice phishing, and this is exactly what seems to have been the case and how it's impacted this particular victim, right? I highlighted here from the Vox article what seems to have been the case, right? It seems like these hackers found a way to impersonate an employee based on information found on LinkedIn. So they social engineering the employees' information on LinkedIn, and then of course they leverage that to get some information and some access through social engineering that IT help desk from MGM. But what also happened is they did something similar to their identity provider, to MGM's identity provider, which in this case is Okta. And so they also performed some activities against Okta there to get some access and some leverage into their identity provider. This caused and has led to the need for both of these parties to actually work together to mitigate potential further escalation, further issues in this particular incident, right? So much so that according to Dark Reading here, another report on the attack states that there was an Okta agent involved in this breach, according to the attackers. But what's important here at the end of the day is that both of these parties have been reported to be working together to cater and help with mitigating that issue. In terms of what that caused, Vox reports here that in about 11th of September here, this cybersecurity issue started at MGM, and it caused a lot of MGM systems to go down, including everything from hotel room digital keys to slot machines and even websites, and the ability for people to check in and even get receipts out of their own stay at these hotels. So quite impactful in terms of their users, their business as well. Something to keep in mind there. Next up, I want to bring to your attention a survey by Cloud Security Alliance. It's a survey that was commissioned by Microsoft to understand the CNAPP availability, but also CNAPP perspective from enterprises versus this particular piece of technology. You must have heard of CNAPP before. If not, I have a video coming out about this soon. But CNAPP essentially encompasses multiple types of cloud-native security and monitoring capabilities and related technologies such as identities for multi-cloud environments into one platform. This is, in a nutshell, what CNAPP is. But then Microsoft commissioned this survey, and it conducted the survey against 1,200 different enterprises across the world to gauge and understand how these organizations are thinking about CNAPP and related technologies. Some of the numbers here that are included in this report, and I'm not showing you the report, but I'll leave you the link for you to download this report in full. But some of the numbers were quite staggering here is that 3 out of 4 organizations use CNAPP, to protect their multi-cloud environment, but 51% of organizations are in the process of integrating security into their DevOps practices, with only 35% reporting complete integration. So there's still quite a large number of organizations that need to complete this integration between their DevOps practices into security and have that whole DevSecOps practices going on. But lastly, just under half, about 43% of organizations identified misconfiguration of permissions as their top concern with cloud permissions in a multi-cloud environment. This here is something that the whole industry and cybersecurity vendors have been talking a lot about. Essentially, cloud security posture management capabilities, and these are part of CNAPP. So this is quite staggering to see that under half identified misconfiguration of permissions in their environments there. And when we think of permissions, we think of multi-cloud environments, but from an identity perspective and entitlement as well. So it's very staggering and important to realize what can be done to circumvent that gap. So in this link, through this link that you can find in the description, you'll be able to download this resource here. Next up, I want to talk about a free ebook that Microsoft made available for everyone, and that was made available in June, as you can see on screen here. But this free ebook talks about the Azure defenses for ransomware attack. It goes on to explain the impact of ransomware based on the cybersecurity report from Microsoft of the last year. But then it dives into how some of the methodologies that attackers apply to ransomware attacks can reach the cloud, and what you can do in order to protect it, to protect your cloud and cloud workloads better. So it's a great free ebook and report for you to understand how you can better protect your environment against these potential threats. Link in the description, of course. Lastly, I want to talk about an alleged hack that happened late September, which was related to Sony. There was a ransomware group claiming to have compromised all of Sony systems. That this is a new ransomware group which is dubbed as and called as Ransomed BC. Now, what's important here for us to see is from this initial report from Malwarebytes Lab, they go in to explain who's behind this alleged hack, so more about that potential group, but also to explain what has been claimed against Sony. This year, because it was just as it was put out there on the web, didn't have a lot of details. Sony hadn't pronounced themselves until to this date. They haven't pronounced themselves. But when we dig a little further into this alleged hack, there is this great video by MITRE, which goes into details on more details about what could have happened behind the curtains, right? And so much so that there seems to be a potential fake claim of fake ransomware there, so potential leverage of the news outlets just for this group to gain notoriety. So that's quite an interesting fact to be aware. But so far, a few days after these initial claims, nothing has been confirmed by Sony or anyone else, and the information that seems to be leaked from this hack is very minimal. It's less than 3 gigabytes apparently, and nothing too critical apparently. So have a look at both of these articles here for you to learn more about this. Next up, I want to talk about processes, starting off by just highlighting how Microsoft concluded a month-long investigation on an incident that affected the Microsoft account MSA consumer key that was gained access by this Chinese threat actor, and which Microsoft calls Storm 0558. So they somehow gained access to these tokens, and that gave them access to the consumer side of OWA and Outlook.com. So now Microsoft, as part of their commitment to transparency and trust, have released the investigation findings in its fullest. So I'm going to leave this very thorough link to this report here on the description of the video. Naturally, there's also another blog here, the original blog for this investigation, that is extremely comprehensive here, so for you to understand what happened and what was the impact. Microsoft contacted the impacted organizations, and if you have not been contacted, then you are not affected by this particular incident. So from a process perspective, going full circle in terms of concluding it, making sure that everything is public and transparent for consumers and customers. Next up, I want to talk about MITRE Caldera. So I've discussed MITRE Caldera before in my channel. I use this platform for my labs and for my own environment to test out attack methodologies against my own systems. And I highly recommend you do so for a lab perspective, from a training and validation and evaluation perspective. But now they announced OT module for Caldera, which is very exciting. So this OT module is a collection of plugins that provide support for common industrial protocols. So this is very important because it extends Caldera's capabilities in these initial release to include support for BACnet, Modbus, and DNP3 protocol. And you can find more details in the official blog in here, but it's quite exciting to see MITRE expand their capabilities and Caldera's capabilities to that degree as well. Next, I want to talk about Forrester Wave. So Forrester released a new Wave report, this covering Zero Trust platform providers for Q3 2023. So 14 providers that matter most and how they stack up. So I'm really a big fan of these analyst reports who are agnostic, so they really go under the microscope to see what platforms are the best for enterprises overall. It's particularly for Forrester's information here for Zero Trust. This is a piece of information that is particularly interesting because I've come from the network industry, so Zero Trust being one of my personal darlings here, so that's quite interesting to see. So this is, of course, Forrester's information, Forrester's blog here, and their own report. So highly recommend you access it to read in details their findings, their analysis, and everything else. But this is what the Forrester Wave Zero Trust Platforms Q3 2023 looks like. We have, of course, the leading technologies here, including Palo Alto, Checkpoint, Microsoft, and then under strong performers, Trend Micro, Zscaler, Google, and a few others, right? So quite an interesting report here. What I like the most about this are the figure 2 and figure 3. Figure 2 because it states in very excruciating details here what are the current offerings for how each vendor was evaluated, essentially, right? And under what domains they were evaluated and how they fared against each one of these domains. So quite an interesting view from that perspective. Of course, if you navigate down this report, you're going to see the vendor profiles, vendor offerings, and more information about how and why they were scored in those manners. So quite an interesting report, particularly figure 2, figure 3 as well. This here, figure 3 covers the vendor offerings that were evaluated by Forrester. So you can see here that some vendors have just one product, such as Cisco Duo here, but you look at the leading providers, Microsoft, Palo Alto, Trend Micro, Palo Alto, and Checkpoint. So they'll have platforms, right? So Microsoft has the Microsoft Zero Trust platform, Palo Alto Network Zero Trust framework, Checkpoint Infinity, which is not just one product, but it's broader than that. So then when we think of all of these, how broad Zero Trust actually is, right? We need a platform to actually build upon that methodology, that framework. And this is what this report by Forrester states. So great resource there for you to have a look. Now, of course, each vendor will have their own post about this. Microsoft released their own here, which is also in the link in the description for you to access and learn more about Microsoft's strategy and long-term strategy that's leading to that very strong and leading position in this wave report by Forrester. Naturally, it's a more than 10 years long developments and investments in Microsoft that has been leading them this way. So great resource there for you to understand how Microsoft is leading the charge into this particular domain here. This is the MITRE Ingenuity Attack Evaluations, yearly attack evaluations for enterprise. This year they evaluated major vendors against a threat actor called Turla, and the results are of course public, so anyone can just head to the link in the description and find everything from the results in here under MITRE. The good thing about this evaluations from MITRE is, of course, vendors have to pull in, they have to be sure about their competence in order to enroll for these evaluations. Then MITRE takes a range of examples from the field and apply them to these cybersecurity vendors' solutions, and of course rates them against their findings. They do so by performing a methodology and using, of course, a threat actor methodology behind it. Like I stated before, they're using this Turla threat actor methodology, and Turla, according to them, is known for conducting watering hole its pure phishing campaigns and leveraging in-house tools and malware. So they have victims in over 45 countries, span a range of industries, so a very prominent threat actor out there. So it's very relevant for customers to be aware of capabilities against this particular threat actor. So what techniques were under the scope of this particular evaluation? It's all listed out here. Of course, you have all the tactics numbers here, so you can click on them, learn more about these tactics. Techniques much the same, using the tech framework. And so they fully explain how they go about going through this particular evaluation. They explain how the operational flows happen here in this particular methodology and evaluation, and what the environment looks like, and what the participants were naturally. So if you're interested to see the results, you can just click on view results, and then you can look for a particular scenario and of course learn more about each participant's results. So for example, if I want to see CrowdStrike, I can click on CrowdStrike. It states the detection key here, so the more specific the better in terms of visibility and pinpointing the technique that has been used. But of course, Microsoft can also be put in under scope in here as well, and so on and so forth. So a great actually platform and information here for all cybersecurity engineers and resources here. And naturally, each cybersecurity vendor amongst the top performers here, you'll find Palo Alto, Microsoft, CrowdStrike. All of them will have blogs further explaining why they did so well, and it's always an interesting read as well. So you can find some of that information in the link in the description as well. Next up, covering some technology news. So this is Cisco. Cisco being Cisco. I was reading an article about Cisco after this headline here. Apparently Cisco has been doing a lot of acquisitions in the past year or so, right? So especially in the cybersecurity space. And this late September, they announced the acquisition of Splunk for $28 billion in cash. So a massive acquisition there for Cisco. It's great to see that now they have an XDR approach with a SIEM approach as well. Well, every large cybersecurity vendor is along these tracks, so they're placing themselves amongst the bigger ones. So it's really good to see. This particular report by CNBC here is quite interesting because they go into the financing details and how Cisco was able to achieve such a deal, right? So they are financing the deal using a combination of cash but also debt. So that's quite interesting to see as well, because of course, the market and shareholders will keep an eye on this to understand what's the revenue and the return on this investment here for them. From a security perspective, it should be a good acquisition, right? Especially for Cisco, because it'll come down to their own platform, potentially their own platform, something that's been in the works for years now. So that's quite an interesting piece of news there. Last but not least, the last piece of information I want to bring to you over here is this one here from Signal. So Signal, the secure messaging platform, has released a white paper indicating the details of what they call PQXDH key agreement protocol. It's a key agreement protocol for post-quantum. PQXDH means post-quantum extended Diffie-Hellman. So this key agreement protocol is designed for synchronous settings where one user is offline but has published some information to a server. Another user wants to use that information to send encrypted data to Bob and also establish a shared secret key for future communication. So it ensures that users are able to talk in a synchronous manner securely post-quantum. So as we know, quantum processors should be around the corner for us, right? So there has been a lot of developments in the field by IBM, by Microsoft as well, and many other leading technology providers there to develop these quantum processors, and thus catering for the security that's gonna be needed for this world is really important. And so seeing this white paper, for me, it's a very good indication that Signal is really thinking about the future and thinking about how to do so, how to get there in a secure way. Now this here is a white paper that goes into the very details of the cryptographic method that is used to ensure the key agreement protocol works properly and securely in such a manner. So it's very technical. I will leave it for your perusal if you're interested, but for me this actually means that they're going the right way about in their research. That's great to see. With this all said and done, I'd like to thank you for your viewership, but also if you're not subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe, leave a like or dislike, and tell me why, what you think about this piece of news. There has been quite a lot this month, so hopefully you found some that were of use for you, but definitely if you are in the industry, all of the reports that came out, one of them must be of use for you. With all that said and done, really thank you for your time and have a great day.